Love that voice. And then Migg, I'm gonna pin you so we can see your beautiful face.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've just got to get my,
Yeah, no, you're fine.
I've got to get my thing up on the screen. Okay.
We can talk amongst ourselves.
I'm almost there.
That's okay.
It took me a wee bit by surprise, put it that way.
Yeah, sorry
That's
about
okay.
that.
No problem.
All right. Just take however much time you need. We're all good.
And
I'm available, Dan, as usual, to fill in any gaps with songs from the upcoming tracks of Shirley Bassey's Best Numbers.
I thought you might want to do a dance number, Peter Cook.
No, the budget didn't get that far. Sorry.
We can't afford you. Is that what you're saying?
Now I've got, okay, I think am I good? I've got my thing on the screen, but now I can't get back to Zoom for some reason.
Oh, we can see you. You're fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. No problem then. Can you see my screen? No, I have no way of being able to share then.
No, we don't see your screen. You'll have to share screen.
Yep, but I need to get the thing back.
Okay.
So technically challenged.
That's all right. I threw you in the deep end. I think do you see the green up arrow button that says?
No, I mean, I'm not on the actual Zoom screen. I'm talking to you. It says I'm here. Okay. But I don't know how to bring it back.
We can see you, Migg.
I know, but that's bizarre. I can't.
She wants to share her images, I think, right, Migg?
Yeah, I'll launch meeting again, and it's just that I wanted to have my thing on the screen so that I wouldn't have an issue showing it. But
that's okay. Well, we can work with that. I mean, I don't think you need to launch meeting again. I think if you just make it's probably a screen that's been diminished or gone by something else.
Yeah. Well, please, if anyone else wants to go ahead, please do.
Okay.
Okay.
How are we going, Phiona? That might have been your 5 minutes.
Thanks, Migg. I appreciate and relate because I'm going to be a couple of minutes getting screens ready too.
Yeah, fair enough.
We'll see who gets there first then.
Well, I only know one joke, but I could tell it.
Go ahead.
Okay, Rebecca's like, bring it on. So I have a terrible memory. I have a famously bad memory, but I taught year 9 for 11 years and it was terrifying. And so what I used to do is on the first day I'd go in and of homeroom and I'd say, all right, who's got a joke? You know, we're gonna be together a lot. We gotta lighten things up and stuff. And they'd sit there, of course. And then I'd be like, all right, I've got a joke and I'm gonna tell this joke every single day until someone brings in a new joke. And by about the 4th or 5th, like the second week, they'd definitely be bringing in better jokes. It's made worse by the difference of pronunciations between Americans and Australians, but this is the joke. A mushroom walks into a bar. He walks up to the bartender and he's like, give me a scotch and soda. And the bartender looks him up and down. He's like, we don't serve your kind around here. And the mushroom is like really cut. And he goes, why not? I'm a fun guy.
Okay,
Okay,
okay, I'm back. I think
thank God. Thank God. That's it. That's the only one I know. Save us, Migg.
It's good. It's good. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dan and Stacey, for inviting me to be a part of this conference. It's been absolutely wonderful. And it's the first academic conference I've been to that I've actually had a good time, I think. So I just want to pay my respects, say I'm living and working on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri and Willam people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and all First Nations people here today. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. My name is Migg. I'm a visual artist, researcher, and PhD candidate heading towards the finishing line at RMIT University School of Art in Melbourne. My research is a practice-led exploration of memory and trauma through an expanded spatial practice. When I read Carl Sandburg's evocative piece for the conference, I loved it. When I sat down to write this paper, I loved it more. I'm going to read it to you again, but first I'm going to see if I can bring up my screen now.
Yes, I believe.
Okay. Share.
You got it. I feel it coming. Yes. Woo! And she's off.
And I'm there, and I'll play from start. Okay.
Woo!
I'm just going to read the poem, Carl Sandburg again. Two bubbles found they had rainbows on their curves. They flickered out, saying, it was worth being a bubble, just to have held that rainbow 30 seconds. I interpret those two bubbles with rainbows on their curves as me and my partner, B, whose life has recently flickered out. I was immensely fortunate to have held that rainbow for 30 years, not 30 seconds. The title of my paper is Little Alleluias, or Bubbles Are Not Meant to Last. I'm inside the remaining bubble, informed by grief and the single-minded writing up of my PhD research. Toward the end of 2020, the love of my life died suddenly. So this final stage of my doctoral studies has been drenched in loss and absence, despair even. Lucky I'm an artist, I told myself, because I could immerse myself in making, the focused site where I'm most present. The other side of this good fortune is a heightened sensorial approach to everything I engage with, a tsunami of emotion and sensation that overtakes every aspect of my life. This PhD research project started with the aim of exploring the traumatic events of my childhood through my art practice and the accompanying thinking, reading, and writing. By situating this research in relation to key thinking on trauma, memory, feminist art history, and queer autoethnography, my aim was to not only transform a fragmented subjectivity, but also to apply these findings more broadly, to contribute to the understanding and expression of trauma as explored and expressed through contemporary art. It was the sense of belonging and safety I felt with Bea that encouraged me to start this exploration. She was so present in my art making, and we had endless conversations about the work and the theory and the impact of trauma, both personally and collectively. Her critical eye was invaluable as I embarked on this PhD and gave me perspective and another way of seeing. The quality of the light by which I began to scrutinize now that she is not, I'm adrift, unmoored, but she is within me. As I make and write, our conversations continue, and I win all the arguments. The bitter irony of starting this research project with an exploration of loss and absence and ending it on this terrible rupture of Bea's sudden death is a visceral remembrance of the raw pain of loss that reverberates across time. It is a very large bed and an empty table. Mary Oliver, that wonderful American poet, talks about poems as little alleluias. They just sit there on the page and breathe. The beauty of a poem, like an artwork, is that it doesn't have to explain or illustrate. It can bring the strands of an idea or an experience together, and through language, visual and or textual, weave meaning. Poetry is visual as art is language. These ideas generated an accordion-style artist book, Gone, which I made on the 6-month remembrance of Bea's death. It is a small hand-sized book printed on heavy rag paper with torn edges. Within it are photographs of Bee's hand, sometimes entwined with mine, that I took while keeping vigil at her bedside. The embodied actions employed in handling the heavy tactile rag paper, the folding and tearing, provided solace and reinforcement of the importance of touch as a means of addressing the pain and trauma of loss. The book comes back from the printer in a 3.4 meter long by 61 centimeter wide roll of heavy textured paper, really more like stiff cloth than paper. There are 5 copies within its width, so I sit down with a long ruler and start to fold and tear the long edges. Then I fold the unruly lengths into pages, carefully creasing the folds with a bone folder. As Bee's hand appears and disappears between the folds, I yield to grief. Those hands that I know so well, that I can feel, that I can see on the piano keys without even closing my eyes. Interspersed among the images are poems that I wrote in the months following Bee's death, cries from the heart. They always came with tears, words, and feelings that could not be contained. They were a one-sided conversation, a distillation of loss, as the gradual acknowledgement of her physical absence from my life slowly emerged. Poems came unbidden. Making olives poured from me as I finished the laborious task of picking and pickling 20 kilograms of olives last summer from the trees in our small garden. Making olives. I realize now so many tasks I undertook were for you. Your delight, your praise, your generous acknowledgement of my talents, mutual pleasure. Without you, there is no point in being, no loving smile or gentle touch, no joyful greeting, no kitchen dancing, shared love of music and dogs. No bitter regret, just the fierceness of missing and endless tears, broken, not knowing how or wanting to have a life without you. And this poem is self-explanatory. Not yet. I find shopping lists written in your hand and cannot discard them. Your music sits on the piano where you left it on your way to bed. Your journal, last entry, November 25, waits for you on the table. I have recordings of you playing the piano, but I cannot listen to them yet. Not yet. Sorry.
Doing well, Migg.
Sandra Faulkner, in her essay, Crank Up the Feminist Poetic Inquiry, Crank Up the Feminism, Poetic Inquiry as Feminist Methodology, discusses how poetry as research offers a means of doing and showing embodiment and reflexivity, a way to refuse the mind-body dialectic, a form of feminist ethnography, and a catalyst for social agitation and change. In other artworks that form part of my research project, I use poetry as a critical autoethnographic approach and consider that poetry can be a feminist research methodology because of what it can do and be, including the messy work of living a feminist life, to quote Sarah Ahmed. The poet and scholar Jay Perini says that as a language adequate for our experience, poetry allows us to articulate matters of concern in such a way that they become physical, tangible, and immediate. By using poetry to articulate the trauma of loss and absence, I bring the past into the present to embody trauma and find a path to acceptance. A central approach to my research is the incorporation of poetic text in my work. The versatility and power of the written word can encourage both artist and viewer to reflect, to challenge ideas of power, identity, and sexuality. The seeming immediacy of poetry and the suggestion of a hyperpersonal voice correlate with current thinking in contemporary art. In Faulkner's Poetry Manifesto, she makes the case for poetry as political, poetry as feminist practice, poetry as social research and autoethnography, poetry as the personal that becomes the universal, and poetry as visionary activism. The self-described Black, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, Audre Lorde, whose quoted passage from her essay, Poetry is Not a Luxury, introduces my dissertation, addressed and confronted racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia. Lorde was a critic of second wave feminism with its emphasis on white middle-class women, arguing that it was not inseparable from other oppressive systems. In that essay, Lorde described poetry as a way to enact an intimate scrutiny needed for personal and social transformation, a way to critically engage the self to set the stage for new interventions and articulations. In this way, poetry would be the linchpin between the personal and the social. Excuse me. For me, art making and poetry are interwoven creative practices, overlapping and co-informing each other. Lorde's poetry is marked by its powerful call for social and racial justice, as well as its depictions of queer experience and sexuality. Her belief that poetry is the way we help give name to the nameless so it can be thought resonates strongly as I pursue a creative practice that is personally and socially meaningful. I'd like to end by reading a poem by Mary Oliver that a good friend shared with me. That time, I thought I could not go any closer to grief without dying. I went closer, and I did not die. Surely God had his hand in this, as well as friends. Still, I was bent, and my laughter, as the poet said, was nowhere to be found. Then said my friend Daniel, brave, even among lions, it's not the weight you carry, but how you carry it. Books, bricks, grief, it's all in the way you embrace it, balance it, carry it when you cannot and would not put it down. So I went practicing. Have you noticed? Have you heard the laughter that comes out now and again, that comes now and again out of my startled mouth? How I linger to admire, admire, admire the things of this world that are kind and maybe also troubled. Roses in the wind, the sea geese on the steep waves, a love to which there is no reply. That is my little alleluia. Thank you.
Migg, thank you so much.
It was a bit more of a challenge than I thought it would be, but I got through it.
You did get through it, and we're grateful that you did. It's beautiful, beautiful work, and I think this is a place that can hold you and your relationship and your loss. And I'm very grateful that you pushed through and went first, and also that you've been sharing this journey with all of us. And it's very beautiful and special work. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, everybody.
Right. I think we'll go next to Phiona. Are you sorted? Should we go to you, or How you faring? And,
Hi, Dan. Hi, Migg. That I was so beautiful. I don't know how on earth I'm going to speak after that. I think we need a kind of wall, a line somehow between. I don't know how to follow that really, but I'm going to try. I can't hope to speak into that space at all. So I think let's all have a curtain, a something. This is a very different type of a presentation.
Good. Good.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen, I hope. Can you see slides or can you see the whole screen?
Slides.
Great. Okay. This is a session called A Bubble of One, Reflections on Witches and Spinsterhood in Pandemic Times. Before the pandemic, we might have thought society looked something like this. And then during COVID, we might imagine a society that looks like this, but we would be wrong. Pre-COVID, if we frame things in neoliberal terms, I was part of a network, or better, I was part of a community. But here is something the pandemic has shown us. Society doesn't look like this at all. It doesn't even look like this. In fact, society looks like this, or like this. And if you're in government devising lockdown policy, then society looks like this. There are couple bubbles and household bubbles and social bubbles. And then there's me, uncoupled, unchilded, a bubble of one, or four if you count the cats. And if you're in government devising lockdown policy, then as a single person living alone like me, you can connect up with one other household. Perhaps you'd like to be the third wheel, hanging out with a couple. Or, like me, perhaps you'd like to be in a bubble with your parents. For the record, I'm 48. I never thought I'd be retreating to my birth family at this age for a core sense of belonging and the only people I'm legally allowed to hug or see in person at this age. But there it is. I thought I was all good with my community, my chosen family, my friends as my family, my oddkin. But I was wrong. For those who live alone, who are not halves of couples or thirds or quarters or fifths of families, and whose households do not reflect the people on whom they depend, the pandemic has been really tough. People living alone, unpartnered, can choose to date online, meet behind masks, or break the law and live exactly as before. Wait, since when did governments get to regulate some people's sex lives and not others? But those of us like me who don't date, people who are celibate, people who are asexual, people whose connection to human others comes in different forms. Because if the couple norm is tenacious, and we know it is, then sex centricism more generally is central to social imaginaries about what society looks like. While marriage equality is necessary, of course, what about equality for those who are partnered in different ways? What about an equality of status for human love and connection and adult interdependence, where this is not a love and connection and interdependence in a romantic relationship kind of a way? Because as nice as it is in my bubble of one, plus the cats, this period of household bubbles sheds an important light on the social normativities and what are seen to be the correct and normal and even legible ways of being and belonging and connecting in the world. These norms have not changed in rather a long time. The original medieval spinsters were sufficiently good at spinning wool to make a living without the need for a husband's protection. But the enclosures of early modern times meant that women who were not producing new workers, that is, mothers, or enabling capitalist working subjects, that is, wives, keeping house so their menfolk may work, those women were now a problem. In early modern Scotland, the Witchcraft Act of 1563 put to death those rebel women who talked back, argued, swore, socially dangerous subjects. In the Scottish Lowlands, the Pink Circle is where I live now in South Edinburgh. Around 5,000 women were murdered in the 16th and 17th centuries for the crimes of living alone, being childless, keeping cats, and otherwise breaking the norms of how women are supposed to live. The Witchcraft Act has of course been repealed, and instead now what we have is the Coronavirus Scotland Act of 2020, which legislates who gets to connect in person with others and who does not. Family and household bubbles are fine. Oddkin bubbles, communities of more than 2 people who don't live together, were made illegal. And in addition, we have the powerful social imaginaries of what is normal and desirable for women. You can be coupled in any way, or you can be a crazy cat lady. As a spinster, you're a human old maid card. Emotional and material dependence within couples is both accepted and expected, while other kinds of relationships of dependence are subject to constant criticism and condescension. How might we theorize this? Is spinsterhood a queer form of queerness? Michael Cobb suggests adding S for single to the LGBTQIA+ rainbow. Dann and Stacey emphasized the relationally lived experiences of queer as fluid, unfinished, playful, and political. Queer theory is most productive for disrupting heteronormative expectations of intimate relationships, rebelling against cultural expectations tied to sexuality and desire, reclaiming peculiar, inappropriate, incoherent, and disgusting affects, and offering new possibilities for thinking, doing, living, and loving. But do I get to call myself queer? Who polices the semantic boundaries of queer? And if the answer is expansive, inclusive, I worry about the potential for ideological dilution. If queerness can and should accommodate anything even slightly slant, does the term retreat from usefulness, risking trivializing and domesticating queerness and diminishing its potential to trouble and shake up social normativities? If this is an area that interests you, this book is out in November. In it, I theorize spinsterhood as fatness and as backpacker assemblages. As Jonathan Wyatt says, the text takes the reader on journeys that are surprising and familiar, confronting us with what we thought we knew but didn't. COVID has been really hard for everyone. Perhaps one silver lining is that it gives us an insight into gendered social norms that we didn't realize we still needed to queer. Thanks.
Thank you, Phiona. Just amazing as always. Yeah, so much to talk about. And in fact, I think it perfectly sits with Migg's presentation. Yeah, I'm excited to see how the last paper will sit as well. So we'll move straight on, but thank you so much for that offering. It's just amazing and beautiful. And when is your book out?
End of November.
Awesome. Might have to have a CAE launch, virtual launch or something. Thanks again. Geraldine and Miriam, and then we can have some chew on it dialogue.
Thank you. We will try to fit in.
No, please don't. No need.
Okay, you ready, Geraldine?
Yeah, ready to go. Thanks, Miriam. Thanks, everyone, for coming along. We'd really like to pay our respects to the Boonwurrung and Gunai Kurnai people of this land, respecting elders past and present. And we also wish to acknowledge Indigenous creative and material practice that existed for at least 60,000 years on this land. Our presentation explores bubbles, beauty, and vulnerability. So I'm Geraldine on the left there by the sea.
And I'm Miriam with Bird.
Who you can hear in the background. So as you probably all know by now, Melbourne's had a long time in lockdown that have come and gone and returned again and again. And Miriam and I have been working together apart, creating and bursting bubbles of work that form and reform as we go.
Our theorising is led by Braidotti's 2020 description of COVID and post-human times. For me, Braidotti illuminates the tension between the multiple crises of the post-human condition and the finite resilience of Zoe, more than human life forces.
And for me, I draw on Braidotti's point that although we are in it together, these COVID times are not all one and the same. And she calls us to an effective resistance, meeting the long intensity, boredom and vulnerability of COVID. She also calls for regeneration as different ways to care through a more transversal relational ethics that also encompasses the non-human.
Our methodology includes auto and duo ethnography, and we draw on both Wyatt and Gale and Farquhar and Fitzpatrick, who share personal stories and their social frames in relation to contemporary theories. Both need each other to make sense of our own situated experiences. Read you a story. According to Braidotti, climate extremes are part of our post-human age of multiple catastrophic events. Recently, on the east coast of Australia, we experienced fire, flood, and now a rodent plague. I live with Bird. He's a budgerigar, a messer, always spilling food on the floor. Bird and I care for each other. This includes regular cleaning, though not often enough, unintentionally leaving open Bird's invitation for Mouse to visit. After the recent floods, Mouse did visit. I got worried, especially for Bird. He's got a tiny digestive system sensitive to any infections that Mouse might introduce. So we set up a trap. Mouse treated the trap like an expensive piece of dinnerware, eating the cheese repeatedly while leaving the trap set. At the conclusion of a week, the trap was still set, but no cheese. Snap! Mouse enters the trap backwards, struggles, unable to understand why the lower part of Mouse's body won't move. I panic. Bird flies behind the bookcase and gets stuck. Immediately, I go rescue Bird, place Bird back in the cage and close it to protect Bird from what I must do. How do I stop Mouse's pain? A hammer? How do I take Mouse outside? Brush and shovel? Though my heart resists, my mind tells me the responsible thing to do is stop Mouse's pain. Unceremoniously, I place Mouse and trap on the shovel, take them out the front door. Then I wrap a hammer and take it outside too. I look into Mouse's eyes and Mouse's little hand-like paws. Don't, I tell myself, don't prolong his suffering, trying to stop my hesitation. I should say a prayer for Mouse's soul. Instead, I utter a pathetic, "Sorry, mate," hit Mouse over the head with a hammer. Mouse gradually relaxes. My heart beats too fast and my stomach churns. I go inside, wash my hands. Bird's hungry. So I feed Bird, and while doing so, discover spots of Mouse's blood on my clothes. I soak them, have a shower. It never occurred to me that the apparently innocent act of adopting a stray bird would lead to killing a mouse. Now I realise my house and I are not separate from the outside world. I take an active part in a living cycle of killing and caring. The act of killing forced me to contemplate the vulnerability of life, to consider whose lives matter and find my own actions fall short of ideal ethical expectations. Carolyn Ellis writes, autoethnography is an ethical practice. In life, we often have to make choices in difficult, ambiguous, uncertain circumstances. At these times, we feel the tug of obligation and responsibility. That's what we end up writing. So I write about the late mouse and reflect on the ethical dilemmas that surround our relatings. When I met Mouse, my immediate construction was of mice as pests, a cultural meaning held for centuries. But what if mice were considered individual beings, even pets, as Beatrix Potter did?
So, same lockdown, different story. Here's my mum, my beautiful mum, behind the flywire screen in her nursing home. And we haven't actually seen each other face to face since 2020. No visitors are permitted in our lockdown at her nursing home, no touching or holding or intimacy, and she's alone in her room. To counter this, my son and I walk the beach, sharing sea experiences with her on FaceTime, which is a brand new experience for her. At the same time, we play her favourite tune, Claire de Lune, beautiful. We wave and blow kisses as we share our screen, and it's as if the music brings the seaside into her room. All at once, time seems to join up, and I remember the comforting sound of Mum playing the piano to us as kids. The time she held my son, now walking beside me, as she sang lullabies to him. All of this as we feel the rhythm of the waves, the rhythm of life, the beauty of life actually, and the way the world just keeps going on despite COVID and the lockdown. As we re-see the mask-wearing beach walkers as connected and part of the greater picture, the seasons of life. Later, Mum says, hearing that music takes me back to my earlier life, the waves rolling in, the shining water, seeing you both and people walking past wearing masks. I'm seeing us in our living world. Our four walls here in the nursing home are refined, defined. It took me out of myself. And my son says, yep, that was certainly a moment. This convergence, our gathering apart, our walking the lockdown edge of longing and belonging together, takes us beyond ourselves. Braidotti's words ring out. Is this a type of regeneration and affective resistance from the no visitor, no face-to-face rules? Is this convergence of the locked down nursing home within the general lockdown and the sea, music and memories a different way of caring, a more transversal relational ethics that encompasses the non-human? Then this year, another type of lockdown and locked-in event happened. I lost the ability to speak for a number of months, only being able to whisper a kind of croaky sound after a medical injury and then a subsequent operation. And with Mum's hearing loss, we couldn't speak together. However, our circular times of walking with shared FaceTime moments called on a new type of not speaking and her not hearing, a silence forming in a type of stillness together beyond words, a silent awareness that I've become aware of through Ang and Mare's work. So for Miriam and I, as a means to interpret our pooled autoethnographies of mouse and mum, and to reflect different perceptions that can exist about the same event after Martinez and Merlino, we fall in line with the sort of serendipitous in and out of lockdown life we are leading at work, not at work, at home, online, you know, everyone's going through it. So we've turned to duo ethnography. We find emergent themes, but the approach seems so boring. Traditional analysis methods seem so inadequate for these times. So with Braidotti in mind, we open up our methods and meanings to affective and performative activations. So we call on Dada-esque poetry, written invisibly, without knowing what the other one writes. But these cuts don't seem to cut it either. So we exquisite corpse the text, unsettling our data bubbles, loosening up the words anew and returning the past. Building and rupturing and making stories as we go, we rip up our bubble logic data. We obscure it. We embody it. We write it up and scrunch it up through material transformation. And snap, the data bubble reconfigures, long but sudden, like our COVID times. With serendipitous technology. And we burn the data poems. We re-see our words through morning light, layers of visibility and invisibility penetrating the meaning, while the wind rips and tears at the text as we throw it into the sea. Water and ink and tide reshape it with affective intensity as we work collectively, reimagining poetry with fading words, now saturated with light and resonance. An affective intensity emerges. Our remaining poetry data bubbles have no words, just remnants of our collective organisations with mouse, mum, bird, sun, sea, the flame, the sand. What comes through now is the light and the ambience of the moment. These aesthetic fusions speak to organisations that are affective, that don't lessen a pandemic, but offer transformative moments of transversal ensemble for our attention during bubble times. And as we continue to world this work together apart, we're realising that our writing, making meanings are actually opportunities to be positive, to keep going, to encourage each other during a pandemic. On this day, day 244 of lockdown, and meanwhile, our research and creation sees us looking out for each other as we continue to grow together. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Oh my gosh, so much deliciousness. Wow. I think people are doing the chat thing, but we've only got about 10 minutes. It'd be so beautiful if we could share together verbally about that delicious work that really did overlap in the most extraordinary ways, I think. The piano, the movement, the visuality, the posthumanism, the death, the loss, the ethics.
Yeah, I'll
Thanks for
say
that.
something.
Yeah.
I'm just quite blown away by all three of those papers.
Yeah.
I'll disclose that I'm writing a paper with Miriam at the moment, so I know her very well. But I just wanted to say how important it is, Miriam, for you to make yourself so vulnerable and tell us that story about the mouse, because I've been, as you know, I've been in countless situations like that before where my cats try and play with things that are not fully dead. And it's a really, really excruciating process, and it seems so like minute in a kind of human-centric way, but it's actually really important. And I really love that difficulty, that staying with the trouble that you talked about. Like, you didn't think that like rescuing and helping a stray would actually enable you, or would actually demand you to become a killer. Yeah, and that's what I think about often as well. I also wanted to say to Migg, I've never met you before, but that was just absolutely mind-blowing. I was just quite moved by the fact that you made yourself so vulnerable to us, and thank you for doing that. But I also wanted to say how kind of it was incredibly academically insightful as well, when I've written a whole lot of notes. It was really, really powerful. And Phiona, as always, amazing. And you, I don't know, I mean, you brought up such important issues and you're always on point. Yeah, this idea of the spinsterhood and asexuality, it's a really, really important thing to start talking about, because I think there's all kinds of relationships that we don't value, that are based on heteronormative kind of ideologies.
Yeah.
So I haven't got any questions. I just wanted to say to all three papers, they were just amazing. Oh, also, sorry, Geraldine, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, you've just...
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I don't know how you've coped, but that really struck my heart, because I was only away from my mother for like a month. I couldn't see her and I was going out of my mind. So yeah. I don't know how you do it.
Well, actually, I think it's her grace and her own courage, and that stillness. Miriam Rose, I can never say her surname correctly, Ongmer, she talks about that sort of stillness of really deeply being present. And, it's, I feel that she offers such a great way to think about that sort of stuff. So, yeah, but, it's been interesting to sort of work with FaceTime with someone who has never wanted to do anything with technology. Yeah. And I think it creates a new type of caring, I'd like to say I feel everyone's work had sort of deep longing and utter respect. Mm. And I really appreciated that. Like, it's the sort of stuff makes you want to cry, isn't it? But it's like, it's so sort of such a long line of, I don't know, authentic, thoughts.
Bird agrees.
Yeah.
I really love Bird's contributions.
Can I say something? You couldn't time me, could you?
Dr. Ann.
Hi, everyone. And I'm in Perth in Western Australia on the West Coast. Phiona, I just wanted to acknowledge your work. I thought it was magnificent. And you've given a voice to the A, which I really appreciate. I think we're so often marginalised and ignored within a movement which claims to be inclusive. And could I just offer my heartfelt thanks for doing that work. I know how hard it is to do it. Secondly, just thank you to everybody. I think one of the things there's many things I've appreciated about this session, but I think all three of you have managed to command critical autoethnography in a way that I haven't seen in every instance in other parts of the conference.
Yeah.
And yes, our birds are talking to each other. He's there calling across the distance. If we're lucky, he might sing for you. He's got a very fine repertoire of jazz and blues.
Wow.
He's very old, and we nurse every day we have together. We've been travelling around Australia for 10 years, making mischief in every university we've worked in around the country. But I really appreciated that beautiful blend of the theory and intellectual work straight out of the heart. And I'm thinking of that model of head, hearts and hands. And I'm just inspired by it. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think it's just gone straight in, hasn't it, for all of us? And yeah, I agree. All three presentations are just the most beautiful threading and weaving of the cultural and personal, the critical and the creative. Probably have time for one more comment or question before we go, so we can be on time for our making session at 5 o'clock. Pete.
I did just throw it into the chat, but what struck me, and Phiona, I know what it is, I'm living alone too. I hear you, and I tell you, it has its own little peculiarities that I don't think I heard that often. But one of the things I was going to say that struck me, and I realised that I'd almost copied something you wrote, Dan, but it was actually the bravery of the thoughts.
Yes.
That really, really got me. Migg, I've seen your work before. You always get me, God damn you, everywhere.
That's my aim, Peter.
Yeah, I know. Well, success. But you know, I just thought that.
Thank you.
And Geraldine and Miriam, that same thing. I think it's at this moment that it really resonates because of how common the brave thoughts are. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Pete. Thanks to all the presenters. What a gift of a session. And I'm going to sign off now and encourage you all to log on to stream 1, that link. Does everyone have that? I can put it in if everyone has that. Okay. We'll see you there in 2 minutes. Thank you.